and welcome to another exciting episode of the Dreaded Archer podcast. I'm your host Trey, and today we got a special guest, Mr. Gilbert Randolph. How you doing today, Gilbert?
I'm doing great.
Good, good, man. Hey, right before we got started, we were just chatting about how I came across your page, and I saw you had liked one of my images or one of my pictures, and I was like, man, who's this Gilbert guy? So I clicked on his page and started going through your stuff. I'm like, wait a minute, do seem kind of gnarly. And then I go to your all my links, and I'm like reading all these articles. I'm like, oh man, he's on to something. He's in the same camp.
Yes, fellow, I guess maybe trash fish aficionados, or I don't know what term we want to use, but alternative proteins, I think, is another one that I've heard.
Oh yeah. Well, where I'm from is it's everything is trash. They call it trash fish. So you got your buffalo carp and your grass carp. Uh, I mean, there's so many things that people call trash, like trash ducks. That's the one thing that bothers me, and we'll get to that later on. But I cannot stand when people say like, "Oh no, they'll kill it, but we won't eat it because that's trash." Then why'd you take the game then?
Mm-hmm.
Just let it make it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So before we get started, Gilbert, hey, let the people know who you are and what you about.
Yeah, so my name's Gilbert Randolph. I am from Missouri. I am a trapper, forager, hunter, angler, rider. Um, and I like cooking. I don't call myself a chef because I'm not. I don't have culinary training. I don't want to have any stolen valor in the culinary world
Right.
there. Um, but I do love cooking, and getting into hunting it has improved my cooking tremendously, because it's made me learn this whole suite of skills that I didn't know before, and didn't use before. And I worked in a fish market in college, and so I learned a lot doing that. And as far as cooking goes, and smoking fish and things like that. So um, I guess it's also worth mentioning that I didn't grow up hunting or fishing. Really, I liked being outside, but I didn't really have any awareness of nature or the ecosystem around me. And then in college, had a friend take me fishing, and I just fell in love with fishing. And my interest just kind of snowballed from there. So,
Right. Hey, I'm in the same boat as you, man. I did not grow up hunting at all. Actually, like my dad, he hunted a lot as I
mm,
grew up. And I always asked him, like, hey, take me hunting, take me hunting. And he was like, "Oh, I'll take you when you learn how to shoot your BB gun." So he got me a BB gun, learned how to shoot it. He still didn't take me hunting. So it wasn't until I got to college and I met my friend Rex, and he was like, "Yo, I'm gonna take you duck hunting." And from that point on, it was just like, all right, we duck hunted, and now I want to do it all. I want to deer hunt. I want to hog hunt. I want to start fishing. All that. Like, I just like jumped head first into it. You know what I mean?
oh yeah, I mean, and there's so much to do. It's almost overwhelming. Like that. That's kind of been one of the challenges of like starting off, is like there's so many things to try, and you want to do them all, but it's literally you can't. Like, I'm like, oh, I want to snag for paddlefish and find morels and hunt turkeys in the spring and catfish, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just like, you're like, like, you kind of eventually find like your priorities and what you really enjoy. But yeah,
What
it's,
it seems like there's never enough time in the year. It's like spring. Like so here in I'm in South Dakota. So
oh,
here,
okay.
like during January, say through maybe March, we're ice fishing.
Mm.
you know, and then as soon as ice fishing gets done, then ice melts, and then you start turkey hunting, and then you want to turkey hunt, and like you said, hunt morels, which I haven't gone out and done yet, but I've had a ton of people tell me I got to go out and do it.
Yes.
So then you got that. and then like turkey season ends, and it's kind of like that lull for some people, but for me, I'm out fishing. I'm catfishing. Um, I get a whole lot of grief because I like to catch carp, but that's just because the fight is so good.
Hell
Like
yeah.
there's nothing like hooking a big carp, and I mean they give you a fight. You know what I'm saying? And not just the big ones. It's even the little ones. They give you a fight. And then like once you're still fishing, then boom, hunting like deer season's here, deer season, elk season, antelope, and it's like I can't do it all.
Yeah. Yeah. When does your guys' deer season start?
If you're doing archery, archery starts September 1st.
Okay. Yeah. It's about the same as ours. I think ours is the 15th of September.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's already in my head. I'm like, I've been getting ready.
Oh yeah, I've actually started doing two-a-days. So a couple weeks ago, I got to meet John Dudley at the Total Archery Challenge, and we were just sitting there, chatting it up. And he was telling me how he has a background in sports, which I played college football as well. And he was saying, once he got done playing, he felt like his body was like every year right around July, when if you're an athlete, you're getting ready to go to like fall camp and stuff like that. He's like he felt he was missing something, so he
Mm.
started incorporating the two-a-days into, but doing it with archery. So shooting in the morning times. Well, actually, he said 3 days: shooting in the morning, shooting during the afternoon, and shooting in the evening. And then as he gets closer to the season, he cuts down the days, and then from 2 days, then going to one, then boom, rolls into the season. So
Huh.
I actually started doing two-a-days. So I get up in the morning, I go to the gym, get done with the gym, go to the range, and I'll shoot 25, 30 arrows, and then get ready for work, get off work. Matter of fact, before I came and hopped on this podcast, I was out in the backyard shooting. So like I'm definitely getting ready for the season, and I can't wait. And I've only been hunting 4 years now, and it's you learn something new every single year that you're going to incorporate into the next season.
For sure. Yeah.
So how'd you get into becoming a outdoors writer?
Um, well, so I had for a long time, I thought I wanted to be a writing professor. And that was like the thing that I went to college for. So I got my bachelor's out of school here in Kansas City. Um, and I think it was the second year. Um, no, this would have been the third year of my bachelor's was when I started getting into fishing. Um, and there is just a really big gap between like academia and the outdoors industry, outdoors culture. And so I was sort of like in the academic world, in the creative writing world, um, getting a bachelor's in creative writing. And for a long time, I really didn't even those worlds didn't intersect at all.
Right.
Um, and then in my let's see, I got married at the end of my bachelor's degree. It's like the week after, I think it was the week after I graduated, or the week before I graduated. I got married, and my wife. I was doing a lot of mushroom foraging at that time, and I actually brought a little demonstration here. This is a lobster mushroom. This is something that I found yesterday, and these are really neat mushrooms. They basically they parasitize other mushrooms, um, and other mushrooms. One that they tend to associate with are Rasula mushrooms, a lot of which are not edible or not palatable, and they take over the host mushroom and they force them to sprout this weird orange thing that is edible for humans. Um, And so it was like stuff like that that just like, I was like just fascinated with mushrooms. And she worked days and I worked nights. And so I would have like 6 or 7 hours in the morning when she was not home before I had to go to work. And I would just go down to this river that we live next to. And I would just walk for like 5 or 6 hours almost every day, and just look for mushrooms and look around. And that's kind of what I cut my teeth on, is just being in that river. And then when I was in my my grad program, that was when actually back up. So I was doing all of that stuff, right? And my wife was like, you should start a blog. And I was like, I don't want to start a blog, whatever. Like, I don't want to take the time to do that. And, I was like, blogs are lame. And, and eventually she convinced me to start a blog. And the name of that blog was Nerd Venture. The idea basically being that I was just kind of geeking out on this new world that I had discovered all around me, whether that was foraging mushrooms, or I kind of unintentionally got permission to trap beavers on a piece of property that we live next to, because I knew the guy who managed it, and I was like, oh, I want to try trapping. I'm going to start small and try for muskrats. And I asked permission. He's like, well, I don't know if we have muskrats, but we have plenty of beavers and you're welcome to take one. I was like, okay. So I like got 2 foothold traps, didn't expect to catch anything, ended up catching a beaver. We lived in a basement at the time, so I had to like clean this beaver in a basement. And like it was, which I never told my landlord about. It's probably good they don't know. But I started writing about those experiences through that blog. But there was still like a very big disconnect between what I would consider like my creative writing, where I was primarily writing fiction and poetry, and then blogging. Like blogging I was not putting the same amount of energy and thought into my blog as far as the craft of writing as I was into the other pieces that I was doing as my degree.
Right.
And then at a certain point I was like, maybe I should like really try to more seriously write about this stuff. And I feel like the big breakthrough for me as a writer, and why I call myself an outdoors writer now, whereas before I didn't term myself that, was I took a poetry class at the end of it was one of my last classes that I took in my grad program. And I just like went headfirst into poetry. And I'd written poetry a lot, but I'd not really put it out in front of a critique class before, where people were reading it and giving me their feedback and stuff. And so I just started writing poetry about death and like trapping and kind of the intersection between like the feelings that I had connecting with my ecosystem and with the mortality of animals and the experience of hunting, and sort of the high points and low points of that, through that poetry. And then it really resonated with people, and resonated a lot with people who didn't hunt, were not at all like in that world, had never even thought about trapping, let alone knew people that did it or whatever. And like, so, and then from there, I started writing more articles. And so, I've written for like Hunt to Eat, and a couple other places. I have some, article about crossbows about beaver trapping that are going to be coming out in the Missouri Conservationist. But yeah, that was kind of like how I very long secured it. That I don't even know what word I just tried to say.
Sounds good.
It was a very long, winding path from me as a totally brand new person in the outdoors and a writer to incorporating my love of the outdoors into my art. It took a long time, but
I mean, that's how like most things go in life. You you love one thing and then you find something else, and you it's kind of like a weird road how they all end up connecting down the way. So like I said before, I had an athletic background, so I played college football, and once I got done playing football, it was like, what am I going to do next? You know what I'm saying? Like,
mm-hmm.
I'm not going to the NFL. I'm I'm a business major, so what am I going to do? And without football, I kind of had this little void. But
Mm.
like I said, my buddy Rex ended up introducing me into hunting, and I've kind of like I've crossed those paths now. Like my athletic background with hunting, now it's like I've merged the two. I go out and I do these like crazy workouts that that are going to help me in the woods. You know what I'm saying? Especially when it comes to elk hunt. Because
Mm-hmm.
last year I did my first elk hunt, and I thought I was going to die 20 minutes in. I was like, I'm not in shape. We're way too high up in these mountains, and this is terrible. So now it's like, okay, this is where my background in sports are going to come in and help me hunt. It's going to help me get in shape.
Yeah, man, the freaking altitude will get you. Like it's a whole nother thing. And like, I've never, hunted in a Western state. The closest thing that we have to that style of hunting is in the Ozarks. And that was like something, even just like doing in the Ozarks, like that, like put a lot of impetus on me where I was like, oh wow, I am out of shape. And like, it is hard for me to get up on these ridges. And like, I don't want to be, dying every time I come out here to try and deer hunt. It's like, and so that's been a motivation for me as well to, realizing like, oh, like, should be physically fit. You don't want to, keep yourself from being injured. And, it makes it a much more enjoyable experience if you're not feeling like your lungs are going to cough out every 5 seconds,
Hey, I totally agree, because like when we were going up, we went to Colorado, and when we got there, we were going to gas stations. I kept looking at the gas stations like, why are y'all selling oxygen in a can? And it
Oh.
was like, oh, you're gonna need it. You're gonna need it if you're not from around here. And so I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna enjoy this at all. But so you that one, first off, that mushroom you showed is pretty cool. So you said it does what to other mushrooms? It cares it
So it parasitizes other mushrooms. It
Okay.
takes over. So it takes over its mycelium. So it's essentially its root structure. And of course, I'm not a mycologist, so forgive me if I get some of these details wrong. But essentially, um, it takes over another a host mushroom, and it fundamentally transforms um, the mushroom which it would normally put out into something entirely different, which is just like one of the many strange, bizarre things that mushrooms do.
Like, it's crazy that like that there's stuff in nature that does that. So I when one of my old bosses, him and his wife, they're like huge outdoors people, you know what I mean? And he would send me, like when he first became my boss, I really didn't know him that well. And he was just like, he knew that I hunted, but that's about it. And every weekend he would just send me these pictures of him and his wife with these like crazy mushrooms. And there was one, I think it's called Tooth of the Bear, or Tooth of the Hound, or
Oh,
Bear
yeah.
Tooth. It's like white. It looked like it. I'm telling you, it looks like icicles. Like, I wish I knew the name of it.
Some people call it lion's mane.
Lines man. Yep, he'd kick my butt for not knowing that. But he was telling me about that, and then him and his wife, they like came across like a ton of morels, and he gave me some, and I'm like, man, what am I gonna do with these? Like, he's like, dude, you can dehydrate them, you can use them in anything, use them like regular mushrooms, and I fell in love with them.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And I haven't tried going out and hunting myself, but I see people all the time, especially like out like we'll have some spots there where they do like burns. You know, be
Mm-hmm.
like a rain, and then like a couple days later, you see people out just like looking. I'm like, what are y'all looking for? Mushrooms. I'm like, oh, okay. So one of the things about mushrooms that always gets me is like, how did people figure out which ones to eat and which ones not to eat?
By dying. Long story short, I've heard that actually one of the ways is that and I haven't like thoroughly looked into this, but I've heard that the Romans apparently did a lot of giving their slaves mushrooms just to see what would happen with different
Right,
ones. Leave it to the Romans to do something terrible like that.
right,
And so, like, some of our mushroom knowledge, global mushroom knowledge, comes from, yeah, people just eating it and seeing what happens.
yeah,
Um, I don't take that approach. That's not my, yeah, and for me, I did basically, I would go out, I'd see a mushroom, I didn't know what it was, so I'd take a picture of it or take it home with me. And then I would go on the Missouri Department of Conservation's site. They have like a field guide that has kind of like a lot of the common mushrooms in Missouri. And I'd find what I thought it was, and then I'd go on Google Images and look at like 50 or 60 different images, and trying to figure out like, okay, what are the lookalikes for this mushroom? Are there any? Some of them, they don't really have any lookalikes. They're
right.
pretty easy to identify. Um, and it was just like, I'm like, okay. Like at first, it was pretty scary because
Like,
you're just,
I don't know what I'm getting into.
yeah. And there's always all these disclaimers too on like mushroom websites. So like, we are not responsible if you poison yourself, blah blah blah. And it's like, oh god. Um, and so yeah, I would just do a lot of research and make sure that I was very confident that I identified it correctly, and then I would try a little bit the first time. And I stayed away from ones that had like deadly lookalikes.
Yeah,
I've since eaten some that do have deadly lookalikes, but to be honest, most of the mushrooms that could be mistaken for something that is deadly are not really that great. Most of the ones that I eat, they don't really have a lot of lookalikes. Most of like the really desirable ones, like morels and chanterelles and maitake mushrooms, all of those are pretty benign. You'd have to, in a lot of cases, I think you'd have to be pretty inexperienced to mistake them for something else.
right. You know, I always imagine like there was like a guy who put out an ad and was like, "Hey, I need like 500 people to walk with me through the woods," and
Oh,
he has a line of people walking like, "Try this mushroom," and he eats it, and then that guy dies. He goes, "Up, this one is not good." and they all keep walking.
I hope you have life insurance.
But I was like, but I'm sure like there was. I mean, like I said, it's all trial and error, man. Like you ate it, you hallucinated. Okay, that one was not good. Ate it and died. Oh well, somebody got to pick up your studies from now from here on out, man. But so like, how'd you get into uh, I guess eating what what most hunters would deem as trash animals or trash game?
um, trying to remember what the first thing. I think the first thing that I became interested in was were freshwater drum. Um, and part of I think part of my interest in trying things that, oh, actually, you know what? Let me take that back. It was because of Hank Shaw. Are you familiar with Hank Shaw's work?
Hank Shaw.
He's
Is he a chef?
he is, yeah. Oh, I can't
Does
remember.
he have that TV show on Outdoor Channel?
I don't think so. He has a website called Honest Food. Um,
Honestfood.net.
yes.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So he had I remember listening to a podcast of his where he interviewed a guy and they talked about eating muskrat and like things like that. And that I think that was really the first thing that drew me um to like, I want to try these kind of weird, kind of out of the box things. Because I think for me, it was sort of getting into, even just getting into hunting at all. When I would talk with people about what I was hunting or trying, even things that are pretty common, like squirrel or catfish or whatever, like people have a lot of preconceived ideas about those, let alone carp or drum and things like that. And so I think, to be honest, I kind of enjoyed some of the shock value of some of it. And I just also enjoyed trying to like find something that was obscure and like that people didn't really do. And so, I was like, oh, well, if people deer hunt, I'm gonna, cook beavers. Or, if people are really into bass fishing, I still don't like bass fishing.
I don't either. I hate it. my buddy Alex is gonna kill me when he listens to this, but I hate bass fishing.
I'm like, yeah, like it's nothing like inherently that I dislike necessarily about bass, but I'm like bass fishing culture to me was very like, I was like not interested in it, did not resonate with me. And I also, for me, like, so many of these sort of like, especially when it comes to fish that we term trash fish are fascinating and really interesting and very different from, the sort of cookie cutter idea that we have of fish.
Right.
And so like, for me, that started with big catfish. I was like obsessed, and I'm still obsessed with like big catfish, just like big slob blue catfish that are like got a belly on them like a pig, and like,
Yeah.
I'm just like, God, those are such cool fish. And then, seeing gar and carp and other fish in the river that I, was spending a lot of time in, it was like one of those things where I was like, man, like, what are these things? And so, yeah, that was kind of like, I would say, the genesis of my interest in that. And I also began to, with like freshwater drum in particular, I tried it and I was like, everything that people say about this fish is not true. Like, because everybody says they're bony, they're, strong, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, number one, they're not bony. They have the exact same bone structure as a walleye or a white bass, or really even a largemouth. And, if you treat them well, they tend to have a texture and a flavor that's closer to like, maybe a red drum or other drum, similar fish. It's not it's like, don't treat it like a walleye. Don't treat it like a crappie. It's not those things.
You treat it like what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get a lot of inspiration from like Cajun food and, from different, like, like Chinese and Japanese cooking, because I feel like their culinary traditions, they tend to treat things as they are, versus I feel like American cuisine, we have these like very narrow expectations of what protein is supposed to taste like.
Yep.
And if something does not fall within those expectations, we're like, oh, it's bad. It tastes bad because you can't fry it in cornmeal and it or whatever. Like, You know.
No, you hit the nail on the head. That's like our culinary styles here in the U.S. is very small. So either you can grill it, you can smoke it, or deep fry it, or bake it, and that's about it. And if it doesn't fit you know, one of those styles, then people deem it it's trash. And like growing up, so I grew up in Texas. So I'm originally from Texas, so down south.
Okay.
And so I grew up like my dad and my uncles, they would go out and they'd catch carp. They'd catch like especially buffalo carp. Like oh my,
Mm-hmm.
I grew up on buffalo carp ribs. Like my dad, they would chop the ribs up, and I mean it looked like a pork rib, but just deep fried.
Mm-hmm.
And we grew up on that, and yeah, it had a little bit of bones in it. But growing up, they taught us as kids how to pick the bones out. Even gar, like we'd go fishing and somebody be next to us, and they'd catch a gar, and they're gonna either kill it or throw it back. My dad goes, "Hey, I'll take that," and he'd he had a hatchet, and he'd take the scales off, and you could either grind the meat up and make like almost like little patties and deep and pan fry them,
Mm-hmm.
or we'd cut them in like fillets and just batter them up, deep fry them. Like there's a ton of ways you can cook different types of fish, different type of game. And I feel like if like and you just said it, if the game doesn't fit the way the people cook it, they deem it as trash, as uneatable, and they write it off.
Yeah, and one of I feel like part of the reason behind that too is like sometimes I think about our access to um, ingredients and spices and just like we have now, because of the internet, like we have the access to the culinary traditions of pretty much anywhere.
True.
It's like, but 100 years ago, even 50 years ago, it's like, your culinary traditions are what your parents taught you, what your grandma cooked. Maybe you went to a restaurant and saw something and we're like, whoa, that was crazy. But, if you didn't have a lot of means, or like I didn't eat out hardly ever, like growing up, it's like you would have to be in a place that has a culinary scene to expand beyond, the boundaries of wherever you lived. Like my grandpa lived in Oklahoma and Kansas, and they ate beans and pork because that's what they had. And
Yep.
like that was like, and like even like until he was until he died, like he had is like beans, pork, chicken, had probably a list of like 7 to 10 things that he ate, and did not eat outside of that. Whereas now it's like, oh yeah, like I want to learn how to make pho, or I want to learn how to make Korean barbecue, whatever it is, I'm like, yeah, I'll just Google a recipe and go down to the supermarket and
And get
try
it.
it.
Yep. And nowadays we have like specialty supermarkets. So like here in Sioux Falls, we have like a Asian market. We have the Asian Central is what it's called, and you can go in there. You can get all kind of ingredients. You know what I'm saying, from that culture that you couldn't get at like Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have like an Indian grocery store. We have a Sudanese grocery store. So you can get all these different ingredients that in the past was not available to us here in the U.S. You know what I mean? So you can make these dishes from uh from other cultures and have the exact same ingredients that they use. And actually, I had pho. Is it pho or pho?
Pho.
Pho. I had pho for the first time, like maybe like 2 years ago when I was in Dallas, and then I had it again a couple weeks ago when I was out in Rapid City, and I was like, I wonder if I could make this with deer.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually found I was like, of course, I go to. I'm a YouTube scholar, by the way.
Yeah.
So I go to YouTube and I just type in deer pho, and sure enough, there was like 5 or 6 videos, and I watched them all. I'm like, I can do this. So that's my goal here in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to make some deer pho.
Heck yeah, man. I mean, that has become a staple, like for me in the winter is, and I've spent time like perfecting it. And then, cause like with pho, I also bring in mushrooms and especially, maitake or hen of the woods. Um, that's like, just goes so perfect with pho. And of course there are some things that I don't always have access to, like bean sprouts or whatever, but by and large, a lot of the spices, star anise is a spice that's like for me has been like the secret to like a good pho is star
Yeah.
anise, and it's kind of hard to find.
What is star anise?
It is literally like it is a star. It's like a little spice that's shaped like a star.
I got a market here in town that's got that. I thought they were like cookies. I thought they were cookies. But also, I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, do that because that spice is what makes pho. Like without it, it'll still be good, but it might be more like ramen or
Yeah.
like whatever.
See, I don't know the difference, like, because I've been to ramen restaurants and I've been to pho restaurants. It all seemed the same to me. So, like, what's the difference between a pho and a ramen?
So like when I make ramen, kind of the like main spices, main flavors, you've got like some sort of like an umami flavor. So like I'll use dried lobster mushrooms, or so dried lobster mushrooms, soy sauce, onions, garlic, ginger, um, and mirin is also like that's another like secret ingredient, which mirin is just a sweet vinegar. And so if you don't have mirin, you can just use sugar and a little bit of white vinegar. It's big old jug of white vinegar you can get at Walmart, wherever. Put a little bit of brown sugar in it, and use that. And basically that acidity is what gives ramen its like pop and what brings out all the flavors in ramen.
Okay.
But then pho, you can kind of think of pho as more like Christmas spices because it has cinnamon, star anise. You can put cloves in it. Things that we generally associate with holiday food,
Okay.
or with German food, tend to be more the flavor that you get with pho. And then of course, like the noodles are a little different, and pho usually has like basil, and jalapeno in it. I guess depending on what garnishes you want and what your tastes are, but that's and cilantro. But that would be the difference for me is like primarily the you got holiday spices with pho, and then more of just like a savory spice base that's not necessarily, it doesn't really have those holiday spices with it.
I Well, I know I love both of them. Both of them are good. And now when I go and I'm gonna try them, I'm gonna look for the spice difference. Like what can I pick out the spices in it
Yep.
for sure, man. So like the one thing about hunting that just really like captivated me was the fact that like you cook the game. That like to me that's my favorite part. I love hunting. I love going out with my bow, my rifle, and all that. But at the end of the day, I love just like cooking and finding different ways to do things. Like try to expand. You know what I'm saying? Like my culinary style. Like you said something earlier, and I thought it was funny. You said, "I'm not gonna call myself a chef. I'm not gonna have any stolen valor." Right? So
Yeah.
check this out. So I I I have an uncle, and he lives in Germany. He's a chef. He teaches at a culinary school or culinary college over in Germany. And I always like push like hashtag wild game chef and all this. And he was like, "Hey, you're not a chef."
He call you out on it.
Yeah, he always like he always luckily, like he doesn't do it in my comment section. He'll call me like, "Hey, you're not a chef." But I try to bend like how I try to bend different ways of cooking, like especially deer. You know,
Mhm,
where I'm from, people cook deer two ways. Either they deep fried or pan seared. That's about it. You
mhm,
know what I'm saying? And I've started like smoking deer. I've done like deer tomahawk steaks where I've actually like kept
mm.
the back strap attached to the rib and they have like a little bone. And the bone is more for presentation than anything. But just trying to stretch the game, stretch what I do with my wild game. Like, do you try to do the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. One of my absolute favorite people that I follow are this folks called Elevated Wild,
Okay.
and he is a chef, um, and they do a bunch of charcuterie stuff.
Mm,
And so and they do wild stuff. Like he did like it was like a 90 or 60-day aged beaver ham. They like basically did a prosciutto, but with a beaver leg. Or he did it with like a whole deer leg as well, where they just like dry aged a whole deer leg for however long, and then you eat it raw essentially.
right.
And so like usually I'll keep I do kind of like the poor man's prosciutto, with a couple different cuts every time, and I get a deer, which is just I like to take the eye of round,
Okay.
um, which is kind of the cut that like on the hind leg, when you kind of pull everything apart, you've got the big flat roast and
Right.
kind of the football roast that everybody cuts their steaks from. And kind of tucked up in there is the eye of round, and it's about that long, and about that thick, and it's just this round, um, cut of meat that a lot of times just gets thrown into the grind pile.
And I
Um,
hate that. I hate that.
yep, just turning everything to burger, which is a time and place for burger.
Right.
But yeah, I so yeah, like you can make prosciutto super easy. You just so you weigh the cut, in grams, and then you um, I do about 2.75% of the weight of that meat in salt, and you cover, so if you got 100 gram um, piece of meat, it'd be like a uh, 2 2.75 grams, if I'm doing that math right, and I'm terrible at math, but you cover the meat in salt, and then you put it in a Ziploc bag for 3 days, and that salt cures the meat. And then you take it out, and you're supposed to turn it too, in those 3 days, so that the salt really like penetrates all areas of the meat.
Right.
And then you take it out, you rinse off the salt, pat it dry, you wrap it in cheesecloth, and you hang it in your fridge for like 2.5 weeks. And the fridge dries out, it sucks out the moisture, and you get this kind of like lunch meat. Or if have you had prosciutto before?
Yeah, yeah. It's normally made with ham, right? Pork, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, you get that prosciutto texture. And it's with deer, it's kind of funky and kind of almost cheesy. And it's really good. I really love it. But that's like the easiest, like getting into charcuterie, curing meat. Like that was my entrance into it. That, and you can do it with a duck breast too. That's very popular. Um, and that's an example of like, yeah, like I want to move beyond. I have my like regular things. I do sear um, a lot of deer steaks and use them for tacos or fajitas or whatever. But yeah, like going beyond the boundaries of what you normally cook.
Right.
Um, is it's fun, and it means that you don't have to eat the same thing all the time.
Exactly, because I get tired of deep fried backstrap. I got tired of uh just just basically just searing the backstrap, and that's like, yeah, is it delicious? Definitely, but you get tired of it. It's like, how can I like stretch this? Like do some stuff that that hunters normally don't do, or uh, but it's just some people don't like that other way. My brother had a bachelor party, not a bachelor party, but a diaper party for his baby last year, and he was like, "Hey, I want you to come, and I want you to bring some deer meat." And I had like 4 deer from last year,
Hmm.
so go home, and first I made burgers, and I had just like 2 backstraps. Now back home, when it comes to the backstrap, they only deep fried. That's the only way to eat backstrap. Just
Hmm.
soak it in buttermilk, batter it up, deep fried. So I did just smoked it for maybe probably like an hour, hour and a half, then took it off and just did like a reverse sear
Hmm.
and sliced it up. It was like medium rare, just like
Mm.
perfect. And people were like, I ain't eating that. I ain't eating that because like I
What?
said, where I'm from, like, hey, they want they meat done, done. And I was like,
Oh yeah.
I was like, one, I am not going to disgrace this animal by cooking it well done. First off, and I was like, if you want beef jerky, go down the street to the gas station. I was like, just give it a try. And Gilbert, I promise you, like after about 15 minutes, there was nothing left. Of
Oh
like
yeah.
there was still burgers. People like they're eating the burgers, but the backstrap was going. It was like I didn't know you could do this with deer. I'm like, yeah, it's treated just like beef. You don't eat your steak. You don't eat your steak well done.
You
Just
shouldn't, for
you
those of you
shouldn't.
out there who do.
Just like, and it was just like it was like kind of an eye opener to a lot of people, and even my dad, who normally, like I said, he wants his backstrap fried. And that's it. He was like, I'm gonna start cooking it like this. This is like amazing. And it's like, yeah, you cook all the flavor out of it when when you cook it well done, or even when you deep fry. I feel like you're not getting the best, the highest quality of the meat.
Yeah, I mean, and like deer meat's amazing. Like people talk about deer meat being gamey. I'm like, it's because you got poop on it, or you got stomach on it, or you got bile on it from when you gutted it. Like deer meat is delicious and
Yep.
it's mild. And like if your deer meat's gamey, it's more likely that you did something wrong in the processing.
Yep. Exactly. So last year I went on my first antelope hunt. And most people were like, when I tell them like, what are you doing this weekend? Oh, I'm going antelope hunt. Oh, dude, antelope is nasty. It's terrible. So the guy that I was going with, I met him actually on Instagram, and he took me
Hmm.
out. And I was like, hey man, people are telling me that antelope is really gamey. It's nasty. He goes, dude, this is the reason they're saying this. He goes, most people, well, you hunt antelope right around like here in October, so it's about 65, 70 degrees.
Mm,
So I live on the east side of South Dakota. So in order to hunt antelope, you got to go to the west side.
mm,
Well, that's about 4 or 5 hours away. So what they do is people on the east drive out west. They'll shoot antelope at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They'll put the antelope on their either in the back of their truck, or if they got like a game hitch or whatever you want to call it, strap the antelope down, and then they'll drive around Rapid City, go eat at a restaurant. Then they'll drive another 4 or 5 hours back
oh
with that
no.
antelope that's sitting maybe 15 feet from the ground. So it's getting all the interstate dust and all that stuff on it. Then they'll get home and they'll throw it in the garage, and 2 days later they'll start processing it. Well, your preparation was bad, man. You know what I'm
It's,
saying?
yeah, I mean that's a great way to get sick and die. Like, just like God, don't do that.
Oh, like so in South Dakota, I kid you not, I've seen guys shoot deer. They'll shoot a deer on Saturday. They will ride around with that deer in the back of the truck for 3 or 4 days. So in those 3 or 4 days, that deer has frozen, or yeah, it'll freeze, it'll thaw, freeze, thaw. freeze, thaw, and then I need to go out there and process that deer. That meat is bad, brother. And then you just wonder why it tastes bad.
uh,
Like my
gut.
thing is get it on ice. Like if it's warm outside, if it's like early September, is get it on ice as soon as possible. Like I'm gonna field dress it, I'm gonna pack it out, and I get to my car, I'll have a cooler, put it on ice. Same thing with antelope. If it's late November and it's like 30 degrees outside, I will take the hide off and I'll let it hang in the garage,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But I'm getting that hide off. I'm going to, field dress it as soon as possible. I'm gonna wash the cavity out and let it hang. But if I, I'm going to take care of my meat as if I'm feeding it to my family, which I am. So
Yeah.
like I want to make sure that I'm taking the best care possible. And I think a lot of people overlook the care of the meat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean that's when it becomes work, and that's when it becomes, it stops becoming just like the thrilling hunt, and it's like, oh, okay, now I have this 200-pound animal that I have to process, which is why I think a lot of people don't. They take it to processors, is because they don't want to go through that process, which I understand to a certain extent. Like, I've had days where it's like I'm running a trap line and I pull up and I've got 3 45-pound beavers, and I'm like, oh God, like I'm going to have to skin these things and gut them and make sure the meat doesn't spoil. And it's a lot of work, but it's one of those things. It's like, that's what you sign up for.
Right.
And you should always come expecting to leave with something. Cause if you don't, the day that you don't expect to do it, that's going to be the day that it happens. And
Exactly.
I've had that happen to me so many times where I'm like, there's probably nothing on my trap line today, whatever, and I go out there and I'm like, oh God, like I had one, actually, I was hosting a wild game dinner. And I really wanted to do some stuff with beaver for it, but I just hadn't caught any beavers. And I had been running a trap line for about a week and a half, and had been getting bamboozled by this freaking beaver that would just, man, he'd come in, like he'd set off a trap. He'd like, basically it looked like he'd like kind of roll over top of the foothold, and it would set off, but he wouldn't get caught by it. Or he pushed over one of my, conibear traps, they're like kill traps. He just pushed it over and it didn't set off because I was a doofus and I forgot to lift off one of the safeties on it. And so, it's like the morning of the wild game dinner, I'm supposed to be prepping for this thing. I've got like 20 people coming over to my house and that I'm going to be cooking for. And I take my wife and my daughter out. They're like, oh, we want to see the traps and blah, blah, blah. I go check it out. And sure enough, man, this big old beaver, it's 45-pound beaver, is sitting there. And it was supposed to be on a drown set. And that beaver had pulled the weight that I'd used up off the bottom of the creek back onto the bank and was just sitting there. I was like, oh no. And so I'm like, I'm going to have to kill this thing. And like my wife and my daughter's like 2 at the time. I'm like, guys, I'm so sorry. Like, just go over there somewhere. Like, I'm going to have to kill this beaver. Like,
wait, did you have something to kill it with?
No. So that was the worst part is I had a hatchet with me that, use the back of it if I had to bonk something. And I really don't like doing that. It's not like I try to use kill sets anytime,
right,
as possible. Cause I prefer, I don't want the animal to sit in a set. And I legally have to check every day. So it's not like I'm not going to leave an animal out in a trap for a long time.
right.
But, I didn't have anything to dispatch this beaver with. And I was like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? And I ended up, I had the worst thing in the world. This is like the most terrible story. This is like my most disgraceful thing, I guess, that I've ever done as a hunter that, is, I was trapping underneath the highway overpass, doing right of way trapping, and somebody had thrown a part of a steel fence over the edge of the highway, and so there was a steel fence pipe, and so I ended up dispatching this beaver with this piece of steel fencing, and it was not. It was terrible. I was like, oh my god, like this is the worst case scenario, and it was one of those things where it's like people are like, well, why don't you let it go? I'm like, have you ever tried to take a 45-pound beaver out of a
Yeah.
foothold trap? Like, they will jack you up. And like, so yeah, anyway, I don't even know how I got on that story, but that was, it was being ill prepared. Yeah, so I don't do that anymore. I make sure that all of my traps are very well anchored, and you know, I generally only use kill sets.
So speaking of beaver, because I was going to ask you a question about this. What do you ever eat the tails?
Yes, that is like, so I've done it in a way that was great, and I've done it in a way that was not so great. This last year, I did it in a way that was not so great, and I think it was mostly because I caught 3 beavers at once and was trying to process all of them and couldn't get to the tails as fast as I should have gotten to them.
Right.
But I actually picked up the idea from Elevated Wild. Basically, so you cut the tail off, cut it in half long ways so that you have 2 flat pieces, and then you can scrape the fat off of the tail. And that fat, you can do a bunch of different things with it. It's really, really good, like cooking oil, if you render it down. And the thing with beaver fat, like that I think often dissuades people is it smells terrible when you render it. It smells weird, like it's like a sweet. And if you've ever rendered like pork fat or any other fat, like rendering fat just smells bad in general. But usually the rendering process gets rid of whatever weird things you smell. It's the same. I go buy pork fat from a guy, and it's like, if I render that pork fat, it's like, whoa, like that's funky.
Yeah, do it outside.
Yeah, exactly. That's a word to the wise. And yeah, so I've done two different things with it. I think my favorite thing with beaver tail is, so you basically cut off these layers of fat, and the fat's tough. It's like hard, like this is a terrible analogy, but like an airhead candy.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and so what you can do is you can pack it in salt, and there's I think it's Italian, but it's a thing called lardo, which is essentially just like a dry cured fat. And so you pack the little layers of these thin layers of fat in salt, and then you put something heavy on it, and let it cure in that salt for like 2 weeks in the fridge. And then you can get it out, and you can hang it like you would prosciutto, and you can further dry it just using the dry air in your refrigerator. And then when you fry that, it's like bacon. It's like the fatty parts of bacon, but firmer and like crispier. And so what I like doing with that is, you fry it and then chop it up, and you can put it in beans or put it in, whatever, something that you want to have like a rich, fatty, kind of crispy addition to it. It's really good that way.
I got a meat eater cookbook a couple years ago for Christmas, and one of the recipes that just threw me off, it was like a roasted beaver tail. And Steve Ranella, when he wrote like a little like a little backstory about the how he came up with this idea or his recipe. But he said it tastes like bacon.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I gotta try this. And actually, the farm that I hunt on, I mean, we got some beavers. I bet you there was a beaver. That was a grown man walking through the through the woods. It had to be like, man, that beaver. If it was up on his 2 feet, I bet it was like, man, like a 4 foot tall. It seemed like it was just a big. I was like, I didn't know beavers got that big, and I didn't have my bow with me, and it was eating on a tree and in one of my food plots. And I'm like, I need to get this beaver, and I've seen like several of them, and I was like, I need to start trapping them and start eating them because I really want to try beaver. You know,
Absolutely. Yeah, and beaver like the most fun thing to trap too, because they're like fascinating and it's like water. I love water trapping. Like it's just neat because you learn so much being around the water in the winter. You know, you see a ton of animals, like you see their like footprints and stuff and their slides where they go in and out of the river or the lake, and like it's so cool. Like definitely should try beaver trapping.
I'm definitely gonna try. I gotta go get me some traps. Uh, I've done coon trapping. I haven't trapped otters yet. I want to trap otters. So we got otters in
Mm-hmm.
the creek too. Yeah, I gotta do otters and beavers. Done coon, done coyote. So now I gotta move over to the otters and the beavers. But so I was reading what's that?
Speaking of otters and of weird food, so I caught my first otter this year, and one of the things that I did with it was I made so like basically jerky chew with otter.
Ooh.
And otter's surprisingly mild. I had like been doing a bunch of research because my initial thought I was like otter's probably pretty fishy. They eat a lot of fish. They smell hella fishy. Like when you pick one up, it's like, whoa, you're like, that thing smells like a fish. And that's why a lot of people don't eat it. But um, freaking, so I just took some of it, I smoked it, and then I dehydrated it and ground it up. And I eat it a lot. Like I'll use it if I want to make biscuits and gravy. Instead of using sausage or whatever, I'll just throw some of that otter jerky essentially in it, and that it just has that smoked, like that flavor that you want, like out of a gravy. I
Yeah.
use that all the time, and it's actually going to be one of my things that I take backpack hunting with me, so that I can make backcountry biscuits and gravy.
Ooh,
Um,
that'd be good.
so
Are,
yeah,
are you a cast iron man?
um, I do like cooking from cast iron, but not during my camping trips because we're doing like ultralight. We're packing in a couple miles,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
so
true. So you don't do like a drop camp, like where you guys have like it all set up and then just leave and come back?
no. I guess we could. We pretty much just um, yeah. I don't know why we don't do that. It's I guess
I don't like I've thought about doing it. I have not. We have not. Me and my buddy Rex, we have not done a drop camp yet. Just for the fact we want to be mobile. Like I want to be able
Mhm.
to just like up and go. So like this year we plan on elk hunting. I'm getting a tree saddle, and just
Mhm.
just just in case the elk aren't talking, we can just find a water hole, get up in a tree, and be good to go. Um, but I made a mistake last year. I took a cast iron. I was like, well, we're gonna be at camp. I'm gonna put a cast iron in my bag. And I was like, it's just one. It's just one. I didn't have a whole set.
Oh
But I'm like, it
no.
was a mistake. Like after like the second day, I'm like, I'm gonna leave this in the truck, bro. I'm not. I'm not bringing this out with us anymore.
No, no, yeah. I'm like bringing out freaking like the only cookware I'm bringing are 2 tin cups, and like doing everything in those because God, like, and like I've had some like issues with my lower back, and so like really have tried to pare down the weight of my gear, and keep it as light as possible, because it can it can take a toll on you, especially if you're hiking up and down ridges a lot. It's just like, man, every ounce counts.
It
You
does.
feel it.
It counts at all. It all counts. So, you know, I love backpack hunting, but I don't like those like mountain house meals.
Mm.
I don't like those freeze dry meals, and except the chili mac. Chili mac is good. Everything else, because I had a business in gravy last year, and I was like, I want to find out who came up with this idea, and I want to go give them a piece of my mind, because you don't do freeze dried business and gravy.
Dude, I've got the biscuits and gravy recipe for you. Um, so because that has also been one of the, I've been over the past couple of years experimenting and trying to figure out meals that are enjoyable, that are simple, that you can cook with a burner and a spoon, and it's like, one of the big things that I do is I take a stick of butter with me, and
Mm,
because having some sort of cooking oil is so enormously helpful when you're out there, because if you're just cooking everything on a dry pan, like, it's just not good.
yeah.
And but I do a lot of, like, I make my own chili and dehydrate it. um One that was really good that I did last year was Italian wedding soup, and I just dehydrate everything. It's like you take the celery, onions, all of that, you just dehydrate it. And then orzo, and then you can just take little chicken bouillon cubes, and boom, you pop it in. Use a little plastic bag that has all of your vegetables and spices and stuff, and you got your little cup and pop it in, and it's like, it's functionally the same thing as a mountain house, but it's much better, and it is better for you generally. And it's way, way cheaper. Like, I'm not about to go spend $9 a meal
That's
camping, you know.
That's what it is. And I got lucky last year because Walmart had they had like a big box of Mountain House, and it was like a 10-day supply, and they had it on sale for like $60. And I'm like,
Oh.
hey, that ain't bad. And it was like five left. So I bought one. I should have bought them all, but I just got one. I want to be greedy. But like, yeah, they get super expensive, and there's a local sporting goods shop here called Running, and they actually have a dehydrator. It's like $2 grand. And I'm the type of person, when I want to buy something, I look at it like, am I gonna get my money out of it? So
Hmm.
I started calculating like how many backcountry hunts I gotta go on to to basically get my money back. And it's like, maybe I think I came up with like 6 years, 6 years of backpacking, and I'd have my money back.
I mean, that's an expensive dehydrator too. Like,
Yeah,
we've got.
it's expensive. It's a big. I mean, it's one of those industrial.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, because like the one that I have, it's $100 maybe. My wife won it at like a work Christmas party, and that has been like, we've used that dehydrator so much for mushrooms, like whatever, like so many different things. But the so the biscuits and gravy, man, all you need is flour, dehydrated milk, um, milk powder, and then baking soda. Or no, baking soda or baking powder. I think it's baking powder. I always get those two mixed up. I just know that whatever
Same
is not the Arm& and Hammer, not the Arm& and Hammer. Um,
bacon powder.
Okay, so it's baking powder then. Um, and baking powder, flour, dehydrated milk, um, and then salt if you want, and then you just mix that together. And your stick of butter, your standby, you just cut a little bit of butter into little pieces, like little crumbs, and you put it in there, put some water in there, mix it up, it makes a dough. And that dough you can either put on a pan and cook it, or you can stick it in foil and cook it. And then gravy is just butter, flour, spices, and then in my case, dehydrated otter. You know, just drop that otter in there and boom, you got a gravy.
I'm gonna give that a try. So I'm definitely got to go out and get me an otter this year.
Yeah, for
Might
sure.
get me an otter. So, so Gilbert, I was reading one of your articles, and it really, really, really stood out to me. Matter of fact, I actually called one of my buddies and I was like, "Hey, you got to read this because it's like it's some deep shit. I loved it. You were talking about Missouri reopening their bear hunting season,
Mm-hmm.
and you were talking about I think it's ecotourism versus hunting. You had an argument about it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of go into that more and kind of explain it to me?
Yeah. So the context of that, so Missouri reopened their bear season, or I don't even know if reopened is the right word, opened a bear season because bears were more or less extirpated from Missouri in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Missouri was a basically at the turn of the century, in the 1900s, we had a handful, a couple thousand deer statewide. We had maybe 12 beavers statewide. Um, Bears had been extirpated. Um, and the Ozarks, like kind of as we know them, as people think of the Ozarks as this pristine kind of untouched wilderness, which is not true. The Ozarks were um, pretty much devastated by logging and irresponsible agricultural practices in the early 1900s, to where the rivers were in terrible condition. There were hardly any wildlife. There's constant wildfires because of the poor timber management. And then over, so long story short, the Missouri Department of Conservation is founded. It's a non-political entity because previous management, wildlife management, was entirely political, like what you see in some current states where you get a Democratic governor or a Republican governor, and then the wildlife management policies either you know go along a completely rural line of thinking if you have a Republican governor typically,
Right.
or if you have a Democratic governor, then you have management decisions that are driven by animal rights activists and not by wildlife science. And that's like an oversimplification of it, but that's the reason. Like the Missouri system, we didn't want that to happen, and so our Department of Conservation operates independently from our legislature and our governor. So, people like the Humane Society, they can't introduce legislation to ban hunting or trapping. That's not their constitutional. They don't have a constitutional authority to do that,
Okay.
unless they amend the Constitution to make our Department of Conservation beholden to um, the political uh, sways of opinion. And so in Missouri, there was a small, I would say a small amount of controversy over the bear hunt. Missouri is a generally very pro hunting, pro trapping state. We have, I live in Kansas City. Um, generally like animal rights leaning kind of um, management ideas are coming from, unsurprisingly, urban centers. But uh, so basically, there was this article in the Missouri Independent, where one of the the state leaders of the Missouri Humane Society was trashing on the bear hunt, and saying more or less that that the Missouri Department of Conservation is rushing into this. They're people are, there's all this bloodlust about, oh, we just want to go kill big bears because we're, badasses, blah, blah, blah. Like, it was like a very dehumanizing sort of the gentleman's article was very dehumanizing toward hunters and people who were interested in conservation, and totally ignored the very, like the 20 or 30-year relationship that the Missouri Department of Conservation has had with the Arkansas Fish and Game Commission, who have been a significant help in reestablishing bear populations, not only in Arkansas, but now because Arkansas has such a robust population, we're getting a lot of their bears that are moving up into Missouri.
Right.
And so kind of the crux of that, of that article and of, I feel like the future of wildlife management is how do we manage wildlife? Do we view them as an exhibit to view? Do we view them as, essentially domesticated tourist attractions that we get to roll up in our cars and take photos of and build big roads and stuff into wildlife areas and fancy resorts and blah, blah, blah. Like, or do we, and I would say this is an oversimplification of probably the Humane Society stance, but
right.
There's kind of a false dichotomy that was presented in the Humane Society's argument against the bear hunt, that it was like, oh, this is going to be a detriment to what they would call ecotourism. And kind of his essential argument was like, oh, people love to go photograph bears and to go photograph elk. And to me, I'm like, that is not the reason that we manage wildlife.
Right.
We don't manage wildlife so that people can fence them in and take pictures of them and think, oh, aren't bears cute? Like, whatever. Obviously, I do have some amount of motive where, I would love to hunt a bear. I would love to go down to the Ozarks and take a bear and eat it and tan the hide myself and do all that work myself. But the hunting economy, it's the kind of a weird balance of ecotourism is this kind of hot new term. And it kind of purports to be the environmentally friendly alternative to being connected with nature. And I love and appreciate the legacy of national parks and state parks, but the reality is with a lot of state parks and national parks, is that they, what they've become is these very curated, paved, extremely trafficked areas where people go and they take pictures of habituated wildlife that are eating food from trash cans, and they call that wildlife, and that is not wildlife. Right. And that's not what those animals, do in their natural state. When you can walk 10 feet from an elk and it is not bothered, that elk is not behaving as an elk should.
Exactly.
And it's the same with bears. And so I think I fundamentally disagree with this vision of we should build our economy around building up the infrastructure of these parks, and creating more roads and creating just levels of traffic in these areas that are not sustainable. And especially during COVID, I actually worked I did an internship with the Missouri Department of Conservation, and one of the things that I looked at in that internship was the the surge of just the number of people visiting parks. And this was especially true in those kind of like curated national parks, places in the West, where it was just like the amount of foot traffic in those areas was just so intense, that it was having a negative impact on the ecosystem, on wildlife. Um, and the only solution was build more infrastructure for those places. And I'm like, it's a difficult tension for me, because I'm like, I want people to have access. I think it's important for people to have access.
Right.
But at the same time, I think there should be, in many cases, a barrier of entry. I don't think there doesn't need to be gravel trails through every conservation area. There doesn't need to be, super easy access to, every place that you can hunt and fish and forage, or bird watch, whatever, like whatever your, hobby is. It doesn't have to be consumptive, as it's been termed. I think I value keeping those spaces as wild as possible, and upholding kind of the long relationship of humans to those ecosystems as predators, and that we, like, our relationship has been for thousands and thousands of years, um, at least in part predatory. Whether we were partially an agricultural society and hunting as well, whatever, you can split hairs on that kind of thing, but yeah, that would be kind of the crux of the bone that I had to pick with the Humane Society, is that they are putting this kind of promise of, oh, this is ecotourism, and saying also that, like, this is bad for the economy, when in fact, like, the hunting industry in Missouri is a huge economic driver.
Yeah, I think you said it brings like $1 billion in a year.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the numbers again. It's been a little while, but yeah, Missouri we have a lot of money, that goes through our state, and directly and indirectly related to hunting and the shooting sports and angling. And it's like, it is what it is. Like, we want to talk, if you want to just talk about the money in the economy, it's like, yeah, like hunting and fishing and angling makes a lot of money. And
Exactly. I read your article, and then I went and read the other guy's article, and I think he said something like, it was reckless for the state to open up a hunting season, something like that. It was reckless or something like that. And I was like, you hit the nail on the head when you say, like, these animals aren't there for us to go through and just take pictures of and and all that stuff. Because here in South Dakota, we got this place called Bear Country, USA. You ever been to it?
mm-mm.
So Bear Country is it's like you drive your car through, you pay, you drive through, and like when you first get in, they got elk, they got wolves, bear, of course, um, all kind of different animals, and they're caged up. And people, like, you're not supposed to get out your car, but people do. Of course they do. They get out their car, but these animals are just kind of like, they're not in their natural environment. You know what I mean? And then
Mm-hmm.
people go to bear country and they think, well, I was able to get out of my car in bear country and take pictures with the elk and the bear. Well, then they go to Custer State Park and they see a buffalo, and it happens every single year, normally around Sturgis. Are you familiar with Sturgis?
That's a music festival, right?
No, it's a big biker fest,
Oh,
big bike,
biker. Okay, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
big bike rally. So people are driving their bikes through Custer, and they say, "Oh, there's a herd of buffalo." So they'll park their bikes, and I think it was a couple years ago. It was a lady. She got off her bike, and the video went viral. It was all over the internet. She gets off her bike, and she goes to try to pet one of the I don't even know what they call a baby buffalo. A baby buffalo. Well, the mom was like, "Nah, not today." And the buffalo went to like ram her. Well, the buffalo's horn got wrapped inside the lady's the belt loop.
Ooh,
So you see this lady, the buffalo's doing this right here, and the lady's just
oh
going
my god.
up and down, and the buffalo technically, I mean, basically ripped her out of her clothes.
Oh my god.
And it happens every year. People get mauled by buffalo out in the hills because they,
Freaking buffalo.
yeah,
Of all the things.
yeah, get mauled by buffaloes. We don't have a huge bear population here. I think there might be a handful in the hills, but not a lot. But when people go through, when they think wildlife is meant is, it's a photo op. It is not a photo op. These are real life wild animals. So like, and you got to approach them as such, and after reading your article, I'm like, man, like he's on to something. Like
And
I
something,
really love it.
yeah, something too to mention as well, like when they posture like this, so the Missouri Department of Conservation, they when the Humane Society postures to say that it's their management method is reckless, it's just ideologically driven. Like it's not true, because the way that their bear season works is is very, very tightly regulated. I think the total quota is 50 bears. I have to double check on the numbers, but you have to call a number every day to see if the quota has been filled in your zone. And if it has been filled, the hunt automatically closes. It's a limited draw system, so I think statewide there's a couple hundred tags given. It's a very low um, success rate. I think it's like in the single digits as
Oh
far as like
wow.
success rate goes. So you may have 400 or 200 hunters on the landscape, but 2% or 5%. I don't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but you might have 10 or 15 or 20 people who are successful. And one the big part of like that article was like his whole prediction was like they're gonna blow over the limit. It's gonna be like the wolf season in wherever it was, Minnesota or Michigan, I think, where they went over the harvest quota.
Oh, that was in Michigan.
Yeah.
Yep.
So basically, that was like his central argument was like they're gonna blow past the harvest measure and blah blah blah. And it's like, come to find out, no, they didn't. They harvested the right number of bears. It wasn't over. The system worked. Unsurprisingly, it was well designed, and also, you know, hunters in Missouri, they understand. They're like, hey, like this is a privilege. Like we're really excited about this. This is something that is important for this region, um, and they want to do it the right way. Um, and so, it's the fear mongering and the just kind of the hyperbole that that surrounds bear hunting is something that bothers me. I want to be able to look at it objectively, and if an agency is not managing bears correctly, if they're not managing them wisely, it's like, yeah, like we can talk about that. Like
Right.
let's put better management practices in. But dispense with the hyperbole and the you know end of times rhetoric.
Right. So Gilbert, tell me about your magazine and how that came to be.
Yeah, so consumptive is basically just, I was like, I wasn't seeing kind of in the hunting world, um, I wasn't seeing a lot of what I was hoping to find. Um, I wanted to find this sort of like bridge between um, the things that I enjoy doing, hunting, fishing, angling, foraging, whatever, from a pretty approachable standpoint, and meeting those with the arts. Um, there's a lot of, I mean, there's some really, don't get me wrong, there's some really great magazines out there, but a lot of them tend to be kind of like gear review oriented, or just like a guy that I know who, Noah Davis, who contributed to this most recent issue. Um, he had told me a story. He had pitched a story to a magazine about this a really cool, meaningful hunt that he had, and he had shot a doe. And he had pitched it to a magazine, and essentially the magazine said, we don't, the deer need to have antlers for us to publish the story.
Wow.
Which is like so lame. And it's one of those things where it's things like that where I'm just like, I don't want there to be boundaries on the way that we talk about and think about the outdoors. And when I say that too, I particularly had in mind that they're within the like outdoors culture, there we have our own sets of taboos and sets of like holy cows that we're not supposed to touch and not supposed to talk about. We're not supposed to talk to animal rights activists or vegans, or consider their ideas, or kind of interact with those kind of lines of thought that challenge the sort of hunting orthodoxy. But I think that it's really important, if we want to take consumptive use practices into the future, that we have to be willing to re-evaluate some of the assumptions that traditional hunting culture has held. And that's just that, it's going to happen whether or not we participate in it or not. And so, consumptive, part of what consumptive is about is like, yeah, like let's talk about those kind of hard topics of like things like, to what extent are animals sentient? How, does sentience preclude consumptive use? Does sentience, what animals have what level of sentience? I think if you have been following the Pardon My Plate series that Meat Eater has been putting out, they recently did an episode where they ate some crow. And crow is one of those things where like crows are incredibly intelligent. And we don't really have that much of a culinary like tradition when it comes to crows, but like the UK does.
Right.
And it is a question. It's like, oh, like, okay, like at what level of sentience do we not pursue something? What does sentience mean? Like all like those sorts of questions I find very interesting. And then of course, I just wanted something that was push boundaries visually and like where I could say the F word or whatever, things like that I'm just like, I can't do that in a lot of the traditional hunting media, which
right.
Sometimes tends to be kind of Christian or culturally Christian, or culturally, in my area, culturally Midwestern, etc. I'm like, that's not who I am. Like, I'm not, I'm a suburban kid. I live in the second biggest metro in my state. I'm not like a country guy,
Right.
so I wanted my writing to reflect who I was and not try to sort of fit within the boxes that exist within the publishing industry hunting, media industry as it is.
I have not read your magazine yet, but I saw the cover. It was called what was in the cover? No, the Carp Revival. I love that. I was like, you should put that on a T-shirt and sell it because I'd give him my money. I love that Carp Revival, and I can't wait to read it because I know you got some cool shit in there. And I was like, yeah, like I said, when I first saw it, I'm like, after seeing that, I'm like, yeah, I gotta talk to this dude. Like this is legit. Uh, but yeah, I definitely can't wait to read the articles. And you hit the nail on the head when you talked about like other like hunting magazines. It's all centered towards it's a lot of ads, a whole lot of ads. Like I get a couple every month, and it's like every other page is an ad for something. It's like okay, like, and most of the time, I kid you not, um I started comparing magazines. A lot of it's the same ads over and over and over again. I'm like, yo, where's the articles at? Like, and you might get like 5 or 6 articles, but the rest of it's just like ads. And it's like, I get you trying to sell something, but like I'm trying to read and like not acknowledge, but I'm trying to learn some stuff about more about hunting. So like, give me more content, other than just ads. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a product of traditional publishing industry versus new media, and we have so much more avenues for monetization now that we don't have to do necessarily that model of oh, we have this many subscribers, so therefore we can charge you this amount of money for an ad.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, like, you got to make money somehow. But at least for me, like, that magazine is not, I'm not making money on it. I'm not really looking to make money on it. It's more of just a passion project for me. But it is one of those things. It's like, yeah, like in the publishing industry, that's why a lot of writers are going to Substack or to, these other platforms where the monetary relationship is direct from consumer to creator, where it's not, because then the other thing about that whole system is then you're kind of beholden to these companies to get deliverables and have a certain amount of eyes on your content, and they'll pull their ads if they don't like what you talk about,
Right.
or if what you talk about pisses off their consuming base. And so yeah, I was just like, I'm like, I don't really want to do that, and I don't have to, so we'll just go direct.
Exactly. Yeah. Get it right to the customer.
Yeah.
So I was wondering. So you have all these like cool recipes that you're putting out with different game. Do you got a cookbook in the works? Can we expect a consumptive cookbook?
I would love to do a cookbook. I've thought about it. I don't have anything in the works, but I do have. If you go to beconsumptive.wordpress.com, I do have a lot of my recipes there, and they're free to use, free to remix. I hope they inspire people and give them some tools to use. So maybe in the future, I'll put together a recipe book, but I don't have any current plans to do that.
I got you. Hey, earlier you said something about doing a wild game feed. Is that something you do annually, or was that just a one-time deal?
I do it occasionally. I don't have one planned this year so far. I have done 2 or 3 in the past year. And the last one that I did, I actually brought in my trapping mentor. His name's Ernie, and he's from California, and was a big time trapper in the 70s and 80s. Would run like 300 sets a day.
Oh wow.
Um, trapping coyotes and muskrats primarily, um, and a big mule deer hunter, and just super knowledgeable. He taught me how to tan furs, and taught me a lot about hunting. He gave me his crossbow, um, and that's how I got into deer hunting, was because he just gave me a crossbow.
Wow.
And so I had him come, and uh, I did a whole game dinner with a bunch of different stuff. I had turtle soup. I had what did I have? Oh, I had deer. We had pheasant. We had oysters, and just just a bunch of different things. I had some wine that I had made from June berries, um, and I did kind of like a short Q&A with him, where I just had him talk about his experience, his connection to nature, and then also like if he could do anything different, what would he do? And basically his answer was, if I could have spent more time giving back to the resource and taking care of wildlife where I lived, I would have gone back and done more of that. And it was really cool because I had a lot of my friends from my master's program came out, and just a huge variety of people who, didn't hunt at all, did hunt, you know, and it was, I love doing those kind of events because, you just gather people around food. It's a new experience for a lot of people. And it's fun to try and come up with different recipes to share. And some of them are good, some of them don't turn out as good.
Right.
But it's, yeah, I really enjoy doing that.
Oh yeah, to me, that like I said, that's the best part of hunting is going out getting the game, but the best part is sharing it with your family and friends and telling a story about how you got that game, how it went from the field to your plate. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, like last year I went on my first antelope hunt with my now one of my good friends, Rob, and I got a pretty nice antelope buck. And when I share the meat with my friends, I tell that story over and over again how the hunt went. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what, to me, that's what hunting is all about. It's going out, getting the game, and then eating it, but then sharing a story on how you got it. And I just imagine like that's what you know, as hunters, that's what we've been doing since the beginning of time. You know what I'm saying? You have cavemen and they go out and they get a brontosaurus, and they sit around a campfire and they're like, Og is telling his story about how, I almost got eaten by this thing, but I took him down. and I just love that part about hunting is the storytelling for me. And I just like I said, I just love it. It's great. It bring hunting and eating has brought people like me and you together. Like I would have never
Mm-hmm.
known I didn't see your, you like one of my posts of, I would have never seen it. And it's all because of hunting. And I love it. And Gilbert, I really appreciate you taking time out of your night to sit down and chat with me. And we definitely got to do this again.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure.
Oh,
Anytime.
for sure. Also, you're in Kansas City and like so down south when something is like less than 10 hours away, we say it's right down the road. So you right down the road from me. You're like 5 hours away. So
Oh,
we
really?
yeah, Kansas City is only 5 hours from Sioux Falls.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so hey, we might have to get together, maybe go out and catch some carp or something, and you show me like how to cook it up, what to do.
I'd love to go out and take an antelope. That would be that's like a bucket list thing for me.
Hey, they just put up antelope archery tags last night, and antelope rifle comes up on I think the 18th. So hey, if you want to go, I send you the link. You can go to South Dakota Game Fishing Park, get you a tag. We can go out, man. We can get one.
Okay, I'll have to think about that. That would be awesome.
Oh, for sure, man. But before we get out of here, Gilbert, let the people know where they can find you on social media and all that.
So, yep, you can find me at Instagram at, let me double check. I might change the name. Um, Be Consumptive. I'm on Instagram at Be Consumptive. You can go to um, my blog at beconsumptive.wordpress.com. You can read my articles in Northland Lifestyle, Hunt to Eat, and some other places upcoming as well. And yeah, of course, on Kindle, you can find Consumptive. On Kindle, you should just be able to search Consumptive, and it'll come up as an ebook. So if you want to check out the magazine, do that. It's great. You'll learn some stuff. Got some carp recipes in there in the first issue. I'm going to be the upcoming fall and winter issues are going to be really cool. I've got going to be sharing my whole fur tanning process in the winter issue. So if you want to learn how to tan your own furs and do a really quality job and not just the cheapo paint on orange bottle tan, this is I'll give you all the knowledge you need to do that. So yeah, check it out.
Oh, definitely. Hey, when you guys get a chance, go check out my boy Gilbert. I'm telling you that you once you see the content, you're gonna love it and you're gonna be hooked. But once again, Gilbert, I really appreciate you taking out time in your night to chat with me. And like I said before, we gotta do this again, my brother.
For sure.
All righty. And this has been another episode of the Dreaded Archer Podcast, and we are out.